inviting me here. It's an absolute privilege to be at such a brilliant conference. I was actually running from another conference at the same time, so excuse the background noise. Hello from Gibraltar. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on which country you are hailing from. So firstly, who am I and what am I doing amongst such distinguished speakers? My name is Cecilia Jastrzembska. I'm the Vice Chair of the National Executive Committee of the Fabians, which is the oldest political think tank in the UK. Winner of the Benazir Bhutto Pride of Performance Awards, kindly bestowed by Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Shahid Amin Khan. A shortlistee for the Outstanding Contribution to Tech Policy Awards by COGEX alongside the United Nations, and a senior policy advisor in central government. But my favorite title is a feminist foreign policy officer for the International Network. Anyway, today I will be talking to you about 3 points. One is COVID as a catalyst for a green revolution. 2, multilateral cooperation to hold top gas emitting corporations accountable. And 3, what key steps we can push for as a global community to protect our environment going forwards. One of my favorite proverbs is, necessity is the mother of invention. This rings particularly true here, where the pandemic has forced us to find virtual workarounds for pretty much every aspect of life, which never would have been considered otherwise. Imagine if you asked your boss last year, can I work from home 365 days a year? They would have laughed in your face. But COVID and the onset of COVID has shown us that not every commute, not every business trip or office, in fact, are prerequisites for operations to run and life to function as normal. Twitter, for example, has already told all of its employees that they can work from home indefinitely, and many other multinational corporations are doing the same. What does that mean for us? Essentially, we are in a situation where, as we return to functionality, we have a unique ability to reevaluate our processes, our expenditures, and what real sustainable success looks like in a global economy. So now I'd like to talk to you about one of the biggest scandals in the climate change mitigation sphere today. Can anyone guess what I'm going to say? It's not Bolsonaro incinerating the lungs of the Amazon at kilometers per minute. It's not the blatant greenwashing of organizations opting to hire PR spin doctors to create campaign content, to disseminate to their consumers how eco-friendly they are becoming, when actually, instead of their stakeholders actually investing in greener options, but something worse. And that is the fact that the very summits are supposedly organized to generate international meaningful action on climate change are sponsored by, can anyone guess? Shell, ExxonMobil, Gazprom, the very fossil fuel giants that are half the reason that those summits exist and the reason that we are here today. And money talks. So every time the output of these summits includes anything even tiptoeing close to worthwhile progress, that progress is stifled by the lobbying loudspeaker of those whose interests remain in profiteering from the status quo of systematically destroying our planet. Take, for example, imagine a human rights charity. Just think of one for a second. Now imagine that a head of a sex trafficking gang was allowed to sit on the board of its trustees. It would never, ever be acceptable. Why? Because it'd be contradictory, it'd be inappropriate, and obviously completely counterproductive. In the same vein, fossil fuel companies cannot be allowed a seat at the table at international climate summits any longer, such as the Paris Agreement. So what should happen instead? Companies such as these should be banned from even attending these summits, and any company which funds projects that significantly contribute to the climate crisis and therefore to global deaths, must be legally required to identify individuals responsible for them. Anonymity is one of the strongest facilitators of crime, and our greatest defense against an invisible enemy is what? To label it. Further to this, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change found that emissions from fossil fuels are the dominant cause of global warming, as we know, to the tune of 71% of global emissions. Over half of these emissions, since anthropogenic climate change was officially recognized, can be traced to just 25 corporate and producing entities. Instead of telling each other that we need to stop using plastic straws, we should be collectively demanding these entities answer for their actions on the world stage. In the UK, the Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations criminalizes false advertising, including deceptive messages and leaving out important information. Greenwashing is the epitome of what this outlaws, technically speaking, and should be met with penalization, as well as all government support for companies that are doing so being rescinded. Green claims should be independently fact-checked and verified before companies can make them. And those companies should be required to receive environmental certification. In essence, what I'm saying to you is greenwashing needs to be made illegal. So what else? Divest, divest, divest. As asserted by Global Witness, the financial sector must take responsibility for the impact of their financing and investments on forests and the climate. Government subsidies must be pulled from environmentally destructive companies that fail to meaningfully strike green transition. Divestment campaigns need to target complicit banks and corporations, and shareholder activism needs to become the next consumer protest. Climate action is no longer confined to the direction given by policymakers in nebulous places. It is now a social movement, a movement which is commanded by both economic and ethical imperatives. Investors in fossil fuel companies carry influence over 1/5 of industrial greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. What I'm saying to you is we are powerful. Divestment campaigns can be a potent force. For example, in the UK, you might have heard of the Tate. You might have been there. We have 2 museums that are visited by millions of tourists every single year. In March, they recently severed ties after 26 years with British Petroleum over climate protests. And now its exhibitions instead feature climate activists and push for mitigation and action on climate change. Just imagine the awareness that one little severance, that one change has created. To sum up, the pandemic is indisputably a tragedy that has brought about great suffering, economic devastation, and the destabilization of international development, not to mention hundreds of thousands of millions of global deaths. However, if we act together, it can pave the way for a schema of substantially more sustainable living. And coronavirus can, in fact, be a catalyst for long-term positive change. Now more than ever, we need to reinvigorate our pursuit of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, invest in green transitions rather than resuscitating the fossil fuel industry, and maintain diplomatic momentum to push for low carbon economies. Organizations commit ecocide must be held to account, and individuals identified on environmentally destructive projects. Clear frameworks for due diligence, for destruction thresholds, for disclosure need to be established, above which sanctions apply. Recourses to accountability need to be created. Greenwashing must be criminalized, standards set and held high. And as consumers, we must invest ethically and divest from banks, funds, and corporations that are bleeding our world dry. As self-made stewards of this planet, it is every single person's responsibility to make and maintain our ongoing awareness of what the key issues of our day are, our times, and how to redress them. At the end of the day, there is no planet B. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for having me.